If 100,000 Jewish teenage girls in their jeans and see-through shirts would say to their 100,000 Jewish teenage boyfriends in their jeans and schlocky t-shirts, oh, if only they would say to them, Scott, Sean, Corey, Rory, Craig, Bradford, Crawford, Lance, if they would only say instead, Shmuel, Beryl, Mendel, Fischel, Herschel, Herzl, Heschel, Leibel, Laser, Ziesel, Yiddel, that was your last kiss. Keep your hands off of me. Go study Torah, then come back and we'll talk about Passion in the Moonlight. Why, great day in the morning, the Messiah would be sitting in a rocking chair on the porch, listening to the summer crickets, smelling the kugel and gefilte fish, just about ready to sit with us for Shabbos dinner. Arise, O Ruchelach, use your eyes and make our shlemiels for Brent and for Schwitzt for Torah. Turn them into paragons of menschlichkeit. Nu, history is waiting for you. These lines are excerpted from a Danny Siegel poem that I first read when I was a teenager. It's entitled The 5-Year Plan, Revisited. In my immediate family, we all have very American names. Lisa, my brother Stephen, my dad, Alava Shalom, David, and my mom, Susie. None of our names are recognizably Jewish, like the ones in the list from Danny Siegel's poem. But you should know that my mom was actually named Zelda Hadassah at birth. And she she begged her mother to change her name to Susie when she was a teenager. After all, her mom had Americanized her name when she came to this country after the Holocaust. My grandmother was born Rivka, but in America, she became Regina. What an impact Danny Siegel's poem had on me. Look what I did all these years later. When I named my daughter after my grandmother, I named her Rivka, not Regina. My mother wasn't too thrilled with our name choice. It was too Jewish. Similarly, when we named our son Ariel, my mother's reaction was, oh, okay, that's great. That's his Hebrew name, but what's his real name? Of course, just because we or our children may have names that are not identifiably Jewish, we can still be identifiably Jewish in other ways. And by the way, I have a third child who doesn't have a recognizably Jewish name. In any event, I was able to respect my grandmother's insecurities about calling attention to her Jewishness because she was a survivor and she personally experienced the fear and the danger of being identified as a Jew. But what about us today? Sadly enough, there is plenty of anti-Semitism to go around. However, we do live in America, the land of the free, the home of the brave. We live in a country where most people openly express their religious, ethnic, cultural, gender identities. So why should we Jews be any different? If Christians in America can call their kids Chris, why are Jews so hesitant to name their children Rivka or Ariel? Why are Jews sometimes reluctant to call too much attention to their Yiddishkeit? Why are we so afraid to reveal who we really are? In Parashat Toldot, Yitzchak is afraid to reveal the true identity of his wife, Rivka. When the men of Gerar asked him about his wife, he said, "She's my sister." For he was afraid to say, "my wife," thinking that the men would or might kill him in order to get to his wife because she was so beautiful. Following in his father Abraham's footsteps, Yitzchak concealed his wife's identity. Later on in the Parsha, we have another case of concealed identity. This time, Rivka tells Yaakov to hide his true identity from Yitzchak. Yaakov dresses up as his hairy brother Esav as a means of getting Esav's blessing. Perhaps we could view this story as a midah keneged midah, measure for measure punishment to Yitzchak for his role in the wife-sister episode. Since Yitzchak concealed Rivka's identity from the people of Gerar, Rivka now conceals Yaakov's identity from Yitzchak. You know, it's possible to rationalize either or both of these cases of hidden identity in Parashat Toldot. But can we rationalize the cases of concealed identity in our own lives? Why was my mom so reluctant to keep her name Zelda Hadassah? And why was she so opposed to my giving my kids names that sounded too Jewish? You know, my mom is not unique in these respects. Many American Jews who are very proud to be Jewish don't want to appear too Jewish. Living in a predominantly Christian society, we want to assimilate. We're often apologetic about our Jewish roots. We don't want our Jewish identities to be too noticeable. For 9 years, I lived in San Francisco. And coming from a very Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York, I experienced culture shock when I first encountered San Francisco Bay Area Jewry. San Franciscans are known for their assimilationist tendencies. Fred Rosenbaum actually talks about this at length in his book, Zion by the Golden Gate. When I was in California and I worked as an account executive at Foot Cone & Belding Advertising Agency, I often had to fly to Fresno to meet with our clients, the California Raisin Advisory Board. And on one flight to Fresno, my boss said to me, "No, Lisa, I heard that you ordered a kosher meal. Couldn't you just say that you were vegetarian? And you probably should tuck your Jewish star necklace into your shirt as well. You don't want to be calling too much attention to your Jewishness. As it is, Armenian raisin packers from Fresno have a hard time relating to a Jewish girl from New York." Certainly, I was shocked at my supervisor's words to me. They smacked of anti-Semitism. But what was most shocking was the fact that my supervisor was a Jew, a self-hating Jew, a Jew who had so concealed her own Jewish identity that I wasn't even aware of it. In a midrash on this week's Torah portion, Midrash HaChefetz, there's a commentary on the oracle that Rivka received when she went to seek God, when she was pregnant with the twins, Yaakov and Esav. "Two nations are in your womb, two separate peoples shall issue from your body. One people shall be mightier than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. V'rav ya'avod tza'ir." And the Midrash poses the question, implicitly, why didn't God remain true to God's word? Why didn't Esav serve his younger brother, Yaakov, during Yaakov's lifetime? And going further on in history, why haven't Esav's descendants, the Edomites, the Romans, Christians, why haven't they served Yaakov's descendants, the Jews, throughout the course of history? And according to this midrash, Esav doesn't end up serving Yaakov during his lifetime because of something that Yaakov said to Esav in Parshat Vayishlach. After years of separation, Yaakov and Esav were about to meet again for the first time. Yaakov sent a messenger to Esav with a message that began with the words, "Ko amar avdecha Yaakov." Thus says your servant, Jacob. The Midrash notes that God was angry at Yaakov for being so self-effacing and apologetic with his brother. So essentially what God says to Yaakov is, since you referred to yourself as Esav's servant, I'm now going to make your words come true. In this world, you will be Esav's servant, and your descendants will be Esav's servants. There's a message to be learned from this midrash about our place as Jews in American society. Unlike Yaakov, we shouldn't be so self-effacing and apologetic. If we try so hard to blend in and not appear too Jewish, we are essentially acting like servants, apologetic servants of the dominant culture. In this vein, Yiddish nationalists like Chaim Zhitlovsky spoke out against radical secularism in the early 20th century. He wrote, Oppressed or backward peoples give up their language out of self-hate, vanity, misplaced idealism, or deference to a dominant culture. But with human progress, there must come a time when there is no more distinction between ruling and subjugated peoples. Each people's cultural legacy is its spiritual home, in which the members of that people have a special interest more than in outside treasures. The Jew should be no exception to this rule. Zhitlovsky's words, like Midrash HaChefetz and Danny Siegel's poem, caution us against Jews viewing themselves in a self-hating way. It is possible to be unapologetically proud of one's Jewish identity while still being inclusive and welcoming. It is possible to be in favor of boundaries between the sacred and profane that are highlighted by meaningful Jewish rituals while opposing boundaries of exclusion or intolerance that result in making some people feel uncomfortable or unwanted in our community due to their race, sexual orientation, gender identity, or religious background. It is possible to openly embrace interfaith families and LGBTQ Jews, as well as people of all levels of Jewish education and observance, while still maintaining the halachic integrity of Judaism. Opening our hearts, our homes, our communities to others is not inconsistent with Jewish tradition. In fact, opening doors is an integral part of traditional Judaism. Hachnasat orchim is a core Jewish value. In a homiletics class in rabbinical school at JTS many years ago, one of my colleagues stood up at the podium before she spoke and apologized for her sore throat. She then proceeded to deliver an outstanding drush. Next, another colleague stood up at the lectern before he spoke, and he apologized for having to read his speech directly from a printed text. And then he proceeded to deliver a sermon that was full of passion and impact. Another student in the class had only one critique about these two speeches. He said, "Stop apologizing. It distracts from your message." Let's apply these words to the issue of Jewish identity. Let us proudly and publicly express our Jewish identities without apology. As Danny Siegel's poem urges us, let's not be afraid to use Jewish names. And if we or our children have names that are not identifiably Jewish, let's not be afraid to be identifiably Jewish in other ways. Let's not be afraid to publicly observe Jewish religious rituals such as kashrut. Let's not be afraid to wear clothing or jewelry that identifies us as Jews. Let's not be afraid to call attention to our Jewishness by expressing our support of Israel. Unlike Yitzchak, who tried to hide his wife's identity, and unlike Yaakov, who hid his own identity, we should stand up and be proud to express our identities without apology. Ken Yehi Ratzon. Shabbat Shalom.